welcome to the premiere of Relationship Role Models, See Love Lived. I'm your guide, Christina Weber, also founder of WeDeepen, WeDeepen.com. I invited my friend Imari Anderson, who's the guide of Yes Send on the WeDeepen network as well, to dive deep into an exploration into the love of Gay and Katie Hendricks. Gay and Katie Hendricks have been together for nearly 40 years. Actually, the recording of this episode was on their 39th year wedding anniversary. Gay and Katie's relationship has been a living laboratory of conscious love. They appeared on the Oprah network in the 1990s. They've coached thousands upon thousands of coaches to help people in love, produce many summits. So I'm so excited that you're here today to dive deep into their love life. This series, Relationship Role Models, has been in the making for quite some time. Through my own exploration, I have learned that most people didn't grow up observing healthy love. And the topic of love, sex, relationship, dating has been nearly neglected in our educational curriculums. So we are launching this series here at the 1111 Global Gathering to dive deep into the exploration, to have you ask that question, who are your relationship role models? And then you can join us the first Sunday monthly here on the WeDeepen network, where you can be a part of the conversation. You can ask your own questions through the interactive experience that's going to happen monthly. So please enjoy this first episode. Happy 11/11, and thank you for being here. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Relationship Role Models, See Love Lived. And I'm so excited. First off, this first episode is releasing at the 11/11 Unified Global Gathering on November 11th. What a special day. And I have three of my favorite people with me. It's really interesting because I'm actually just meeting two of them. So pleasure to have you here, Gay and Katie Hendricks and Imari Anderson. So I'm Christina Weber, and I'm founder of WeDeepen. WeDeepen is a network of interactive experiences and entertainment for people who want healthy relationships. And this series, Relationship Role Models, has been something that I've been concepting for a few years now. It started with just me pondering, like, who are my relationship role models? You know, most people didn't grow up observing healthy relationships. The topic is nearly completely neglected in our educational curriculum. So where do we go to learn love and see love? And this relationship between Gay and Katie Hendricks is something from afar that I have been admiring. You two have been together since the 80s. You've shared this is your 39th year wedding anniversary, and I imagine you were together before that.
Yes, we met in 1980, and we got married in 1981.
Yeah.
And so, we knew each other for a year or so before we got married. But
Wow.
I knew the moment I saw her that she was it.
We're gonna talk about that too. And you were married in 1981. I'm 39, and I'm single. I can envision the type of love that you two have in my life. And I invited a friend of mine, Imari Anderson, who is a phenomenal coach. He's the host of Yes End on the WeDeepen network, and he is single as well, living in Los Angeles. I don't know how people feel about introducing us, like, with your relationship status. What do you feel about that?
It was definitely weird to hear. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess, yeah, sure, I'll identify single.
That's your new identity, single guy.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well,
yeah, you got everything else right, but we'll see how long the single thing lasts.
So yeah, let's dive into it. You know, I your relationship from afar, so I've heard the story of how you've met. But I would love for you to share it, because it's, as you said, it's the moment that you saw her. But I imagine did you see other people before her and thought that was the person too?
Not really. I mean, I'd had other significant relationships, but they're sort of in a different category now, looking back on it. Um, but how we actually met actually starts the month before, because I just come to a big realization about how I messed up every relationship I'd ever been in since my teens, and that how relationships in general get messed up. And one is by not telling the truth. And so I'd never even learned how to tell the truth about my feelings accurately. So when a woman would say, "What do you feel about that?" I would usually turn it aside with a joke or say, "Well, I'm not that kind of guy. I don't have that feeling thing. I don't do feelings." And so I realized that in stonewalling people about knowing my feelings and knowing who I really was, I was really cutting myself out of life. And so I realized, okay, from now on in relationships, I'm going to just be who I am and tell the truth. And the second thing I realized is that every relationship I'd ever been in had been messed up by one or the other of us going for the victim position and saying, "You're doing it to me, it's all your fault." And then the other person would say, "No, it's all your fault, it's all your fault. I'm right, you're wrong. You're right, I'm wrong." So that whole drama that I bet you've been through in other relationships too, I realized I'd been doing that unconsciously for years, because that's just the way it was done in my family, and I didn't know any other alternative. The third thing I realized is that when I sacrifice my creativity for the relationship, I always have problems. And so I realized I want to be in a relationship with somebody who really is in touch with their own creativity and isn't struggling with it, that really is out there doing what they love to do. And so, whoosh, a month later.
Yes. So Gabe came to the graduate school where I was a movement therapy professor, but I was also getting my PhD. And he came to teach a weekend on energy and coaching, and I knew, and breath work. And I knew right away that I wanted to be in this workshop. And so when we gathered in the morning, he hadn't even opened his mouth yet. And he was looking around the circle, and he came past me and then came back, and we had a infinite moment of recognition that was so deep it took us months to kind of unpack it. And then he went on around and started the circle and started speaking. And when I heard your voice, I first of all thought, this is the smartest guy that I've ever seen. And then right away, you made me laugh. And the funniest guy that I've ever met. And so I was enthralled with just the energy and your consciousness. And so I went up to ask him a question at the break, and I didn't even get the question out of my mouth. And I can't remember to this day what the question was, because he said, the first thing out of his mouth is, "I'm very attracted to you."
Remember, I made this just talking about my feelings openly.
I love that
So
so much.
Okay. But then you followed it with.
I went in. This was the first time I'd actually, since I'd made up my mind about this new relationship thing I wanted to be doing, it was the first conversation I'd had with a woman about that subject. And so I think I was primed and ready to go. And so out of my mouth leapt this most amazing thing that I never would have said before in a million years. And I just looked at her and I said, "I'm very attracted to you, and I'd love to ask you out for a cup of coffee, but I want to let you know that I'm only interested in relationships where both people are absolutely honest with each other, and both people take responsibility for the stuff that's coming up rather than blaming and running for the victim position. And both people are really committed to their creativity. So on those terms, would you like to have coffee with me?"
So here's what so I heard that, but what I really heard was, "Hey, I don't care what you're doing. I want you to drop whatever you're doing. And I want you to come to Colorado." This was in California. "I want you to come to California and have this relationship adventure with me. And I don't know what will happen, but I know that I know that this connection is permanent." And so on those terms, so what I said back to him was, "How about lunch?"
So she went even took it to a different level. But I want to tell you what happened for me when I was looking around that circle. You see, I teach at those days, I especially taught how to read energy in people's bodies and how to do breath work and how to work with people at a deeper than the mental level. That was the thing that I was interested in teaching that weekend. And I have a specialty also interest in breathing and breath work to use for therapeutic tools. And so as I was looking around the circle, even before I opened my mouth, my custom is to kind of look around and read the energy of the room, particularly where people are alive and flowing and where people are stuck and just the place in their bodies they're stuck. And so I had maybe 50, 60 people that I was doing a quick scan on. And when I passed Kathleen, now known as Katie, around the house, when I saw her, I saw this amazing radiant energy system. It was almost like she was pure love. That's what it appeared to me. And I went on past her and then I said, wow, I got to take another look and see what she actually looks like as a real human being, because I was seeing her as an energy configuration. And so I came back and wow, she's the most beautiful human being I've ever seen in my life. And I told her that just this morning, as a matter of fact. And so that was a beginning for me, as a recognition on an energy level that has only continued to deepen over the years. And so I always say, somebody asked us a while back how long we've been together, and I totaled it up, or I had one of our students totaled it up on her calculator and realized that we'd been together 14,500 days. And, you know, they talk about taking 10,000 hours to get good at something. It took about 10,000 days to get good at relationship. And hopefully, because we've come up with some ideas about how to do it, it won't take you all so long.
Hopefully. I got a lot of things to do. Christina, if I may jump in, because I have so many thoughts brimming in my mind and brimming in my heart. So, thank you for that story. First of all, that was fantastic. And I love the energy with which you say the story. And for me, I'm hearing this through line that is almost unspoken, but for the viewers and the audience members, I really want to hone in on, which is this idea of like authenticity, this idea of like, and I'm curious to hear what you have to say about this. Like, can two people who are not authentic on a first level with themselves even find that kind of love? Because like you said, Gay, you had a breakthrough a month before where you're like, I'm not going to have any walls. I'm not going to have, you know, these blocks and these obstacles that you have to jump for. And I'm going to speak what's on my heart. I'm curious that I would hear what you have to say, but I personally don't think that you would have found her in this way or seen her in this way or ended up with her in this way unless you had already done that work on yourself.
Well, that's really true, because I'd already been a long time meditator. I'd been meditating for 10 years or so and had done a lot of body work on myself and that kind of thing. So but here's the thing, Imari. What we've discovered is that you can only really love another person to the extent that you can love yourself. And so I think what you're talking about is the same thing, right? The extent to which you know yourself, you're going to manifest a partner that knows himself or herself. And it's always a one-to-one kind of thing. You know, you always get what you've come to in yourself. And so I think that what you have to do as an individual coming into a relationship is find out what you're willing to learn. Are you willing to learn about relationship? That's why I'm so excited about your new website there, Christina, is because, you know, there's so much to learn. Here's, you know, like, I don't know if this is true for you, but in order to have a successful relationship in my grown-up life, I had to unlearn all the stuff I learned about relationship when I was a kid, because I didn't see any healthy role models at all until I was maybe 21, 22 years old and was going into graduate school, was when I actually saw the first couple that I could really relate to and say, that's the kind of relationship I want.
And what we find too is that relationship can be a place where you can be yourself. The advantage of authenticity is that you're revealing who you really are. And not only does that open up an energy flow that is amazing and a kind of aliveness, but it signals to the other person and to the universe that you're available. you're available to play, you're available for feedback, and that I aspired to become completely unedited, to be able to say whatever was on my mind with Gay. And in fact, what that's turned into is what we now call speaking from discovery. So rather than focusing on, are you withholding something or not revealing something, it really becomes what's emerging that wants to be expressed. And that in the space between us, when I have something that I want to explore and I start telling Gay about it, I discover what it's actually about in that space of authenticity. So I really think that, and that's one of our major commitments in Conscious Loving. One of our commitments we wrote about was basically, I commit to revealing rather than concealing. And that's been a really powerful like tent pole through the years.
Mm.
Now, do you guys think that, so both of you are coaches, do you coach each other, or do you have other coaches that you go to, or is that all non-existent anymore at this point?
Really non-existent. I mean,
Yeah.
we practice what we teach.
Yeah.
And so, we haven't had a critical word between us in 20 years.
Yeah, we created what we call a no blame zone, and we've had no blame and criticism in our household in this century. I like to put it that way.
That sounds
so
very
far, we've
impressive
got
when
an
you put it like that.
unblemished record this century.
That sounds so impressive when you put it in those terms. I actually have a personal question that I would throw into this mix, and I think it'll apply to a lot of people actually, is like, for me, in my day-to-day life, I'm a life coach, right? So I train people and I help people and I move them through what blocks them. And what I found is interesting is that when I'm in relationship, because that's my natural state of being, I want to support my partner when they're going through things. I want to kind of, help them move through whatever traumas. And then I have this other thing that comes up that says, that's not my role in this space. That's not my role in relationship. So, but I find that so interesting, because to not be in that role is also me compromising my authenticity, because that's who I am as a person. So I would love, as two coaches in relationship, to any thoughts you have on that.
Yeah, we use our own tools constantly on ourselves. Katie might come in and say, hey, I'm upset about something that just happened, some business thing. And so I listen to her and, if I have something to say about it. But to me, these tools we're talking about, like revealing versus concealing, or taking responsibility versus pointing the finger of blame, they are so fundamental that I want them taught in the first grade. I want them taught in kindergarten. There's no reason to have a person have to wait for graduate school to find out how to have a good, loving relationship. To me, this ought to be the curriculum that people take in school, rather than sitting around for a year trying to memorize the capitals of the Latin American countries. I remember that in the 6th grade. That was. I
don't know if they still do that, but
nobody has ever come up to me and say, Dr. Hendricks, do you happen to know the capital of Bolivia? But I've been stopped on the street 100 times by people saying, Dr. Hendricks, what should I do if my husband is doing ... So these are such fundamental things that we need to have them as part of life's curriculum, not just set over here in the realm of relationship therapists or something like that. So I applaud you for stepping out of the role. See, if your partner had a flat tire, you wouldn't say, well, I'm in relationship with you, so you have to use the jack yourself.
Independent.
You need to be independent, honey. If you know a tool for how to get unstuck, by all means, use it.
It was always fascinating. Pat Allen used to do this First Monday event in Los Angeles that I would go to, and I'd see the most people in the space were all pretty much over 35, and they'd fill the room with like 70 something people. And there would be that point of like, oh shit, things haven't worked out yet. So now we're coming out to learn love and to learn relationship. And what I think about that is, I'm curious, so yes, and we do, it's questions and conversations that challenge the status quo. And the next question is gender roles. How do gender roles play a part within your relationship?
I would say they play a part in our relationship as we are perceived. So when we first got together, we would get a lot of calls to Dr. and Mrs. Hendricks, and someone would call and say, "Can I speak to Dr. Hendricks?" And I would delight in saying, "Which one would you like to speak?" The gender roles were more the expectations of society, and in fact, that was one of the things that I wanted to share, is that our education really has us be scared of the other gender. So currently, we don't really have an opportunity to get to know each other as individuals, as what I call evolving works of art. And so when we get into relationship, people think that this other person is their own personal fixer-upper, that, you know, it's like has possibilities but needs a little work. So, and that's really also supported by the external world. Like you have to, for example, you have to be more feminine so he can be more masculine. And what we really find is that if I'm looking at you as a unique work of art, my job is to appreciate you and to support you in opening up to what you most want in the world, not to improve you or to say, or to get into control struggles. So I think if we had more education about what are you thinking and feeling and what's going on for you, and we can actually have conversations with each other as people, that's the best background for forming a healthy relationship.
When you were born, Imari, we were just going on Oprah for the first time. Yeah, you were born around 1991, right?
92, yeah.
92, yeah. So when you were being rocked in your mama's arms, she was watching Oprah. She was watching us.
That's where I know you guys from. I know it.
Right. I knew you were right. Okay, so but I wanted to say that when we were coming along, there wasn't any Oprah, there wasn't any self-help books, there weren't any relationship books. And in a way, I'm glad, because we kind of had to sit down and kind of make it up ourselves and figure out, you know, okay, what is the problem with these couples that are coming to see us now? What are the central problems? Right. And, you know, gradually working those things out. So I think because now a lot of people have been doing that over the past 30 years or so, thanks to Oprah and self-help books and therapy and things like that, there's a lot more awareness now of the possibilities of close relationships. When we first started, actually, the first time we were on Oprah, they actually said, "Which one of you is the talker?" You know? And you can imagine whose blood pressure went up about 75 degrees at that point. Because they were heading over to me, you know, and, thinking I was the talker.
So
but we
yeah.
said, no, both of us are the talker. You know, you got to set up the furniture on the stage so that both of us.
That was the other thing that we noticed, and is still pretty much true, is that media is not set up for relating. It does headshot. So you don't actually see the interaction and what happens between people. So that's been a lot of what we would introduce, like, hey, you got to make the space big enough for us. In fact, one time they said, look, you can't sit as close to each other as you are, because we can't do the headshot thing.
And so we said, let's do a two headshot then, you know, but
get us together.
Business. And I'll always be very grateful for having been invited on that stage a couple of times to talk about our work, because actually in the post-Oprah era of our lives, we put in, I think, 2 million frequent flyer miles added up together, traveling around the world doing relationship seminars. And I'm glad we did, in a way, because any culture in the world you go to, there's cultural differences. There's differences between the way men are treated and the way women are treated all over the world. But once you get underneath the skin in the actual energy system of people, we are all the same. You know, like people in Calcutta have exactly the same relationship issues down at the core that we have over here or in any other place in the world. It's just as often muted and covered up by the cultural differences that are going on in the situation. But underneath the robe, underneath the veil, inside the house, it's always the same. That's why I know we can teach this to first graders. And I have people all over the world ask that question at lectures and stuff. Why don't we teach this in school? You know, and maybe next generation. We're seeing it.
We'll see.
A lot of teachers that come and study with us and So it's a heartening thing that's happening.
Can we rewind 40 years ago to the process of you two falling in love? And was that a process of you and was there courting? Was there chivalry? Is like what was the that process of the, you know, they say falling in love is like a drug. You know, Helen Fisher's work talks about the brain, it changes the brain. What was that process like for you?
Well, there was definitely like that.
It was
because
definitely like that. Changed our brains instantly.
Well, and also there was this one afternoon that I can remember that I got to spend with you where it was raining and there was music playing, and it had this magic about it, you know, that I knew that if I never felt another feeling in my life, I could go to the end of my life and say, okay, I knew what life was all about now. And so that was the experience for me. So it was definitely a rush. And I mean, I feel it this moment too. But what happens, of course, is in a relationship, that connection invites up all the things that's in the way of you living in that connection all the time. That's where the work gets done, you know, because there was this moment, because I used to be a very critical person. I mean, I couldn't go 10 minutes without criticizing and somebody. And so that's just the kind of family I grew up in. It was just relentless. And
I grew up in a family where I was always criticized. So it was kind of a perfect match, which also means that you're going to enroll somebody in your life from whom you could learn something that you couldn't learn in any other way. It's the big journey of the big adventure of relationship is being able to expand your capacity to actually give and receive more love. And so anything that's in the way of that is going to come up so that you can open up to it and love it. And so for both of us, I grew up in an extremely critical family where feedback was criticism. And so it was a perfect match. So one of the first things that we needed to work out was, are we going to live in criticism with each other? And we decided one of our first commitments was to create a relationship that was blame and criticism free.
We got a big inspiration for that one weekend because Katie's parents came to visit us and spent the weekend with us. And I suddenly realized they are so critical with each other. They've mastered the art of chronic, constant criticism with each other. And I told Katie, we do that too, but we're never going to be as good as them. Let's not even try, you know? And so that's why we made up this new game called Living in a Criticism-Free Environment. And it took us years to get trained out of criticizing each other or ourselves. But now, you know, nobody said a word of criticism in 20, 25 years. And so it allows a lot of kind of creative growth when you don't have to worry about defending yourself all the time and arguing about who's right and who's wrong.
I love that so much. So wholesome. Thank you guys.
Well, it's awesome to live in. So the experience of living in someone else's regard. So I know that Gay is completely for me and that he supports me living my full life the way I want to live it, and having that atmosphere, having that kind of the pool that I swim in is so delicious, and being able to let go into that so that I'm not defended. I can be completely undefended with Gay. And that was such a switch from my early life. And it's something that we can give to other people around us, not just to our intimate partners, that each of us can be a space of openness and connection and appreciation. So the relationship skills are not just for romance, they're really for all of our relationships.
I wrote down in my journal the other day that I envision myself with a partner who, when he is thoughtful, that he includes me in his thoughts.
Lovely.
I have a question for you, Gay. Actually, both of you. I think I'm very interested to see what you have to say about this. So you talked earlier, Gay, that you had relationships prior, but when you met her, it was like, oh, this is something different. This is like something unique. This is something that is standalone from previous. And I like we said, I think it is part of like the authenticity that you were stepping into and kind of like the breakthroughs that you were having. Um, and this might sound like a cynical question, so just let it out first. Is I think and I feel and I notice that a lot of people are in those relationships that you were in prior to meeting her, thinking that it's the one that you're in now. Not because they're getting that same experience of like, wow, I'm like seeing her energy and it's just like overflowing, but more so out of like loneliness, like, oh, this must be what love is, because me and this person kind of get along. So I'm curious what you have to say about that. Like how I've been in many, I don't know, many relationships in my past, but I would say I can tell the ones where this was a cosmic connection. Like there was something more here. And I feel blessed in that way because now I have like a barometer, a filter through which I can move forward now and like, no, like this is these kind of relationships, this is this kind of relationship. So my question to you, I guess, is what would you say to the people who are looking for what you have, but have never experienced it, so they don't have a way of detecting it?
Great question.
Great question. Well, first of all, know that experience of feeling that kind of cosmic connection, that's a very rare thing. Not everybody maybe feels that, but it's an exalted thing. But let me speak to the other side of that. A lot of people confuse deep sexual attraction for that kind of cosmic connection. And what often happens then is the relationship goes into a pattern where the sex is great, and then you go into patterns of fighting and then have great sex again and go into patterns of fighting. And so that's coming out of that deep sexual connection. It's trying to get you to that cosmic connection, but there are barriers in the way that you keep hitting. And I kept hitting the same barriers over and over again in my single life. I always describe my single years, 13 years or whatever it was of being single, as having my relationships had the trajectory of the Titanic. They would start off with great fanfare, and then I would hit an iceberg after 6 months or so. And it took me 15 years, though, to realize that the iceberg was me. And I always thought the iceberg was out there somewhere. But what it was I keep running up against these old patterns. And there was this one magic moment. Maybe we were 6 months or a year into our relationship, something like that.
About a year.
The time you came home with the grocery bag.
Yep.
Yeah. One time, this was before cell phones were invented. So Katie had said she was going to be home at 7:30 or something like that. And it got to be 8 o'clock, 8:15. And I was getting progressively more worried. But then when she walked in the door, my default position was to criticize her. I started saying, man, why didn't you, where you been and all that. If I'd been a little more mindful, I could have seen that she was carrying 2 large grocery bags, which might have explained her tardiness a little bit. But I was criticizing her and suddenly I realized, wait a minute, my voice sounds irritated, but my gut is scared. What am I scared about? And then in that moment, I said, I thought I was angry, but I realized I'm scared. What am I scared about? Oh my God, I'm afraid I'm going to lose you.
Yeah, that was such a magic moment because I could feel his feelings and that him letting me in to what he was actually experiencing rather than being defended with me. And it had established a whole new level of authenticity and trust that we can still draw on. We can still feel it. But I was also referring back to your original question about role models. And I was just watching the documentary on Obama's years in office and all of the pictures of the day-to-day life. And for me, a relationship in public that is a model of what relationship can be, just look at the Obamas. And how they look at each other, how their regard, their rhythms, they're clearly completely open to each other. So I think we do now have more role models than we used to. And we can also go, gee, I would like to have that for me. I don't know how, but that's where it starts is, I want that. And then I can open to it and I can commit to learning how to do that. So we found that committing and recommitting are such important steps in going from where you are to where you want to be, is making a commitment and then recommitting when you mess up.
Love that.
If can we also then rewind to then now 20 years 20 years ago, you said something that you haven't had a turbulence in your relationship since 20 years ago, and I believe there was a chapter written about in the
Conscious heart.
yes, the conscious heart. And that, during my preparation for this conversation with you, that did come up often of women saying that and I had friends actually a couple years ago text me and be like, I'm reading this chapter. Good luck with going deep into your relationship. I don't know if I'm ready for that type of.
Well, yes, just to give the audience a quick summary of what happened. This goes back to actually 25 years. So it's a little bit even further back in time. But when I was turning 50, and I had kind of the textbook 50-year-old male crisis, where I got the hots for a 25-year-old woman who was a very lovely person and everything like that. So it wasn't just sexual. She was a beautiful individual in lots of ways, but it was something that had never happened to me before. And so, but we practiced our principles. Yep. I told Katie, hey, I'm feeling some attraction for this person. And in fact, I actually told Katie before I told the individual, because that was my priority, was to make sure that in my relationship. Fortunately, it didn't go all the way to a full-scale physical affair and all that, but it was a test. It was definitely a wake-up call. Was our relationship big enough to handle something like that? And fortunately, after I kind of felt my way into it, I realized, oh, this doesn't have anything to do with wanting to have sex with a 25-year-old woman. What this is me about is me feeling like I'm just going through the motions now. I've given the same speech 182 times and I've been well paid for it every time. But I wasn't discovering anything new about myself. And I'd gotten into too much businessy stuff. We were running a big business and all that stuff. And, we had 3 or 4 houses and a business building in a period of time. And so it was just life doing what it does, and unfortunately I woke up and realized, oh, this is what's important. The flow of creativity and the flow of love, that's what's important. And so we got rid of one of our big buildings and we got rid of one of our big houses and we kind of cleaned up our act in a sense, and got back to who we wanted to be.
And for me, it was I realized that it was a polishing away of roles that I had learned, and everybody learns roles, particularly in relationship. Like women are supposed to be like this, and men are supposed to be like this, and all of the magazines are about, well, what do you have to do to get your man, and it's always the woman's responsibility, and 5 ways that you can keep your man from cheating, like it's all the woman's responsibility. And
that's the problem. You forgot your 5 ways.
I forgot my 5 ways. What I realized is that I had, and also I admired Gay so much. And that was part of my first falling in love with you, is how much I admire you. And then I realized, oh, that had turned into a kind of persona where I had become devoted to you and not really devoted to my own awakening and my own genius. And so I committed fully to expressing my own genius in the world. And that polished away this devoted persona so that I could stand fully in my own power with Gay, rather than having a jockeying of control issues. So it was a big shift. And regardless of what happened in our relationship, I'm grateful for having that wake up call and finding my own authentic core.
I think personally, if I hadn't had that awakening, I'm not sure I'd even be alive now, because I rebirthed myself out of that experience and reawakened my creative connection with myself, which is still going on bigger and bigger and bigger to this day. Since I was 65, I've written 8 mystery novels and 3 or 4 nonfiction books and produced a movie and things like that. So once you turn on your creativity, it doesn't ever go anywhere as long as you keep opening up to it more and more and more. And so I'll always be grateful to that particular time. And anybody that has the urge to go read that chapter, whatever it is, chapter 6 or whatever it is of the conscious heart.
So that brings me then to a question from a member of our community. And she had asked if your work has expanded to include polyamory. And polyamory has, in the conscious communities has, for sure, around it, it kind of even had me a choice. I prefer a monogamous relationship, or maybe it's monogamish. I don't know the terminology now, because I believe that I would like my partner to have, they talk about emotional affairs, and I believe, I would love for my partner to have relationship with women and to have friendships and emotional connections with other people. So how, during that even period, 20 years, did you consider is monogamy? And how did you choose? Did you choose from the start that we're going to stay in a monogamous relationship? Do you revisit that?
Well, you have to remember also, like, I came of age during the 60s.
Yeah.
So we've seen polyamorous communes, all kinds of different relationship experiments that people have done. And a lot of them very courageous. And we know people today who are experimenting with polyamory. But for me, it's really a question of, how do I want to be using my energy? Because it's being in a polyamorous world is pretty much a full-time job. And, who's doing what with whom and handling the issues that have come up and, all of that, it really does take a lot of energy. And some people, that's what they want to do. But I really wanted to use the intimacy of our relationship as fuel for my purpose in the world. And it really does fuel our expressing of what is wanting to be of our purpose, what's wanting to be expressed through us. So we have coaching practices. We teach people all over the world how to create conscious relationships. And we can count on the fuel source of our own relationship to really power that.
We've had the opportunity to counsel any number of couples who are interested in polyamory, and a number of people have come to our trainings who are interested in that. And I honor anybody who wants to experiment like that. I personally found I have never seen a polyamorous relationship that got to the kind of intimacy that we're very interested in helping people get to. And I think it's just because of that thing that you really need to focus your intention in a container and then grow within that container rather than, leaking out the energy. And theoretically, it's possible, and God bless you if you can do that. But I don't want any part of it, and I don't counsel anybody to get involved with that if they want to really go all the way. Find somebody that you can open your heart and soul to and see how far you can go. That's, to me, the only Mount Everest worth climbing.
What would you say to the people, like back to my earlier question of that moment where you found your person, right? The person who's just changed your entire brain chemistry. What would you say to the people who haven't found that yet?
Find that with yourself. Open up, learn to love yourself at such a deep and unconditional level that the universe has no choice but to provide you with a companion.
We have a book and an online program called Attracting Genuine Love, where we've really put together the processes, the attitudes, the approach, and basically the obstacles to overcome within yourself that really open the door to a loving relationship. But at the very base of it is, there's something in each of us that we're afraid is unlovable. And we try to hide that from ourselves, and then we hide it from other people. And so there's a place that's closed off. And when we really come into, even my perfectionist is lovable, even my needy
Right.
orphan is lovable, then that becomes available for other people to love us in that
Right.
place that we think is unlovable.
And I know we talked about Gay had like gone through the experience of like having his breakthrough and stepping into authenticity and transparent communication. Where were you in that journey, Katie, when you all had met?
Well, I was actively practicing that when I've been a passionate advocate of authenticity and justice my whole life. I remember coming up out of my seat in the 4th grade and telling the teacher that he couldn't speak to another student that way. And then I looked,
why isn't everybody else standing up?
Well, also a little bit of like, I'm in trouble. So I also have always been able to see when people are lying and to see when something is being withheld. And so when I met Gay and I saw this amazing openness, that resonated with me so deeply that it awakened that place in me that I'd had to kind of hide, because having a 4-year-old tell you what's going on is a little threatening for for adults. So I sort of hid it for a long time. But with Gay, I could let that part of me just shine.
Right. But thank you for that. I'm seeing like not like a contradiction, but like an issue that I want to bring light to. And I 100% agree with the premise that in order to find this kind of love, we have to be in an authentic space. Like we've got to be genuine with ourselves. We've got to love ourselves. And we'd be lying to ourselves if we said we did not live in a society in which most people are not operating in that space. Right? We're living in a space where most people are playing roles. We're living in a space where most people withhold their authenticity. Right? So I would say, apropos, that most people aren't on the path to find this relationship. Most people aren't in those relationships. What would you have to say to that?
Well, I remember a couple that actually we just saw again a week or two ago. The woman, before I met him, the woman was a single woman, about 55 or 56, I think.
Yeah, she was in her early 50s.
And very successful person and that kind of thing. But she'd been married a couple of times. And she said, I'm afraid to open my heart to be in a relationship again, just because I don't see it possible. She said, I remember specifically, she said, the statistics were more likely that she would be captured by terrorists than to actually have a relationship at age 55. And I said, what? All you need is one. You don't need statistics. You don't need 3.5 billion. There's 3.5 billion people of the kind you're looking for here. And all you need is one. And I can remember the look on her face about coming down out of all the reasons she had considered that she wasn't ever going to be in a relationship again, and saying, okay, let me just figure out again what I most want. And this magic happened where she went to speak at a conference or attend a conference, I think, and she met this person, and whoosh, and now they've been together 20 years. And so what I say to people like that all the time is, if that's what you really want, don't ever settle for less. It's much better to be impeccably single and know what you want than it is to compromise and keep settling for less all the time. That's destructive to your self-esteem. What we need to do is stand up fully in what we really want, what our heart really wants, and go for that. And there's no guarantees here on this planet, but we've seen so many people come out of the despair of being single for a long time and find somebody by learning to do a few different things in themselves. And those are the things we want to offer to people. You can always go deeper by loving yourself more, by getting clearer on what you want, by getting clearer on what kind of person you want to spend your time with. But it really comes down to, first, treating yourself the way you would want a partner to treat you.
The thing I would add to that also is being willing, because you're stepping into the unknown, and that can be scary and you don't know what's going to happen. But if you're willing, that opens up a different kind of flow inside than I'm going to do this and being stubborn or just being frozen in your fear. So if you're willing, you can be willing and scared. You can be willing and not know how. And if you just keep coming back to this is what I really want and I'm willing, then I find that universe is going to provide me with my next learning. Here's the next opening. Here's the next step on the path that's going to lead me toward that love relationship.
We have people stacking up outside our door here shortly, so we're going to need to wind this up.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was such a great conversation. I could sit and talk to you both all day, and I'm so grateful. And I'd love if at some point to come back and join us for an experience, a live experience at WeDeepen. Would be great to have you. I have even so many more questions, so we'll go through those at another point. I will leave this conversation super hopeful. You've definitely warmed my heart. It was confirming, and just, yeah, I feel excited to be out in the world and actually to, to say I am single and to give, I'm very grateful that I'm not in a relationship I need to get out of, that I'm clean and I'm open for something new.
Right. Right. You're open and you're willing and you're learning.
Yeah.
Someone once told me that if you pass 10 cars on the highway, 9 out of 10 are going to be operated by people who don't like their car. And same thing, if you pass 10 married couples, you're going to probably find about 9 of them that have got serious doubts about whether they ought to be in that relationship or not. So make sure you are operating the vehicle you like in all ways.
100%. Yeah, I'm definitely leaving feeling a very confirming feeling. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your thoughts. I really appreciate the insight. I really appreciate the experiences that you've had that have given you these insights. And definitely the relationships that I'm in, the kind of dating scene that I'm in right now, I'm leaving this conversation knowing that there's some conversations I need to have. So.
Okay, well, it's been a real pleasure to talk to both of you. You're both very bright lights, and it's always fun to be asked great questions by great people. So many blessings to you on the evolution of your own lives and your work.
Yeah, thank you so much. Super appreciate this.
Thank you so much.